She divorced me the way someone clears an old dinner table clean without regret. After 8 years, not a single tear. Just, I've changed. I didn't beg. I just nodded like a man who already knew he was no longer being chosen. A month later, I was walking beside someone else. Emily, her close friend. Warm, quiet, and the only one who had asked me, "Are you really okay?" I thought I had found peace again, but when Rachel saw us at the party, her eyes didn't look like someone who had let go. "This is what peace looks like to you," she shouted, in front of everyone. The one who chose to walk away had come back demanding justice of the heart, turns out. Some people only want peace if they're the ones who win, and I had broken that unspoken rule. 8 years doesn't sound like much until you lay it out like a highway. We crossed state lines for jobs we said were for the future. We learned the layout of new supermarkets, the traffic rhythms of new neighborhoods, the way an unfamiliar house slowly decides to let you in. Promotions came with late dinners, clinking glasses, and emails that bled into Sundays. Grief showed up in tuxedos and hospital gowns. We did all of it together side by side on a couch that sagged in the middle, a dip formed by two bodies drifting closer out of habit. The quiet at night felt like safety. Her head on my shoulder felt like a lock clicking. I took the stillness as proof we were sturdy. I told myself real marriages outgrow fireworks. I didn't see what the stillness was hiding the small distances that multiply when no one names them. Years later, I'd map those distances like exits we'd missed one after another until the road ran clean out. It happened in the kitchen, the place where we'd argued over basil versus cilantro. Rachel set her tea down and looked at me like a manager signing off. "I want something clean and calm," she said, the exact cadence people use to approve budgets. "No dredging up the past. No attorneys unless necessary. We can do this like adults." I felt the word adults like a trap door. If I protested, I'd be the messy one. Her face didn't wobble. Her hands didn't fidget. After 8 years, not a single tremor. I wanted to ask for a do-over for counseling for one last sprint to the line. I wanted to give the speech men practice in mirrors when no one's watching. Instead, I nodded. I kept my voice low and steady, the way my father taught me. To hold a plank shake on the inside, still on the outside. The nod felt like courage. Later, it would feel like surrender. That day, it passed for dignity. Mediation sounded civilized. A third chair between us. A polite hour with water in glass pitchers. A list of assets and accounts spoken like weather. Rachel even floated the house. "You can keep it." Friends called it gracious. I called it confusing. She praised our maturity in texts that read like press releases, and people applauded the way we were handling it. Our mediator said we were one of the easy ones. Easy is not the same as painless. Every signature scraped a little more off the surface. Every polite nod sanded down the last traces of us. I kept searching for a flicker, anger, grief, anything messy enough to convince me there was still a pulse under all that poise. Nothing. That's when the mask slipped, not in her expression, but in my understanding this wasn't kindness. It was distance dressed as virtue. If love is attention, then we'd stopped paying each other long before the invoice arrived. You can win an argument. You can't win a shrug. When the paperwork started moving, I realized I was fighting a vacuum. There was nothing to push against, no slammed doors, no last-ditch ultimatums, no scene to storm out of, just dates on a calendar and tasks to complete. Men like me are taught to absorb, to eat the feelings, and lift the weight anyway. So I acted competent. I made lists. I labeled boxes. I split the cookware like a fair clerk. Inside, I was losing to silence. It was everywhere in her steady texts, in the mediator's professional smile, in my friends. "You're handling this so well." The silence said, "Be good, be neat, be over it." I couldn't bleed anywhere without breaking the script. So I folded the ache into the day and called it taking the high road. The high road is beautiful from a distance. Up close, it's lonely and long with no gas stations for miles. The house sounded different with just me inside it. The refrigerator hummed like it had secrets. The hallway breathed. Her side of the closet wasn't just empty. It was a cliff face, a clean cut through rock that still looked fresh. I poured bourbon and turned on a show I didn't care about letting the laugh track do the work. It didn't. The quiet pressed in anyway. It's funny how peace can be loud when it's the only thing you hear. I tried on memories like jackets and took them off again. The bed felt bigger and smaller at once. I lay there measuring the volume of air where Rachel used to sleep, as if I could calculate how much of her had evaporated and how much I'd imagined in the first place. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I understood a new truth endings don't echo. They absorb. You speak into them and your voice just disappears. The next morning, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't expected. Emily. Warm, observant part of Rachel's college orbit, the friend who always asks good questions at dinner. If you ever want to talk, I'm around. Not a rescue rope, not a fishing line, just a door cracked open. I typed, "I'm fine," and deleted it. Fine is the mask men wear when they've forgotten where their face is. I typed coffee and hit send before I could rewrite it into something cooler. She replied with a time and a place, a small anchor, dropped into my day. I stared at the blue bubble longer than I should have, surprised at the relief I felt. I wasn't looking for a fix. I just didn't want my thoughts to keep echoing off the same empty walls. If silence was winning, maybe conversation could at least get me back on the scoreboard. We met in a corner cafe that smelled like cinnamon and new starts. Emily didn't tilt her head with pity or try to script my feelings. She asked, "How is it actually?" I said it felt like being disqualified from a race I never entered, standing on the track while officials fold up the finish line. She nodded like someone who'd seen that happen before. She told me she had asked Rachel back when the clean and calm plan was forming. "Are you sure?" Not accusatory, curious, careful. She was the only one who asked. That mattered. We didn't flirt. We compared notes like survivors do after a storm, pointing at the damages and the parts that held. I heard myself say things I hadn't admitted even to the mirror. The words landed and stayed. When we parted, I felt lighter, not because anything had changed, but because something had finally been said out loud. Coffee became a walk. The walk became a cheap dinner. The dinner became a habit that didn't feel like a habit. No grand declarations, no plans to figure us out. Just two people moving through hours that used to feel heavy and discovering they could be light. We texted about normal things, a stray dog she'd befriended, the way the sky looked like a bruise before rain. She laughed easily, and her laugh didn't ask anything of me. I found myself sleeping better after days we'd talked, as if conversation cleared the static from the air. There's a kind of safety that grows when you're not auditioning. With Emily, I wasn't trying to be the man who handled everything perfectly. I was just a man with a grocery list and a story that needed telling one page at a time. That rhythm didn't erase the past. It gave the future a place to land. It happened under a street lamp that flickered like it couldn't decide to commit. I told Emily the thought that scared me most. I feel replaceable. The word tasted like metal. She didn't rush to contradict it. She looked at me the way you look at something you don't want to break. Then she put her hand on mine, steady, not tentative, and said, "You're not disposable." She stopped showing up. Simple, blunt, merciful. Something in my chest unclenched. I leaned in before we could overthink it. The kiss wasn't dramatic. No fireworks. Just gravity doing what gravity does when two bodies finally stop resisting. We stepped back and laughed at how ordinary it felt, how right. I didn't feel like I'd crossed a line. I felt like I'd stepped off a ledge I'd been standing on for months, maybe years, and learned the fall was shorter than I feared. The next morning, I waited to feel the hollow rebounders talk about that airy panic that says you filled a crater with confetti. It didn't come. I journaled like the therapist I hadn't met yet would approve of. I checked my motives like an inspector poking at beams. Was this about replacing Rachel, outrunning grief, winning some invisible race? The answers were quieter than I expected. With Emily, the silence wasn't empty. It was restful. Meals tasted like food again, not chores. Music sounded layered. I caught myself humming in the car. Those aren't fireworks. They're power coming back online after a blackout. I told a friend I trusted, and he waited for the scandalous detail. There wasn't one. Just two adults going slow because slow felt honest. If there was a rule book, I hadn't read it. I only knew the quiet in my house had changed tones, and for the first time, I didn't want to turn the TV up. A month after the papers cleared, David texted about a Saturday barbecue burgers, a playlist stuck on early 2000s hits, kids cannonballing into a pool they weren't supposed to run near. Emily hesitated. Rachel might be there. I heard myself say, "It's been a month." She wanted peace. I believed it when I said it. Maybe I needed to. We drove over holding hands the way people do when they're still surprised they get to. The backyard smelled like lighter fluid and sunscreen. Friends did that double-take smile thing, the one that says, "I'm processing, but I'm happy for you." For the first time in weeks, I felt like a regular man at a regular party, not a storyline people whispered about in kitchens. I didn't see the storm forming by the pool yet. I only saw sunlight on water and thought maybe this is what moving on looks like: ordinary, public, uneventful. I was almost right. David's place smelled like lighter fluid sunscreen and whatever summer is supposed to feel like when your life isn't on fire. Emily and I walked in hand. The grass had that sprinkler shine. Kids skidded in flip-flops. Somebody argued with the Bluetooth speaker like it was a person. People gave us the quick double take, then the practice smile that says, "I see you, I'm clocking this, I'm still glad you're here." We grabbed beers, did the small talk lap work traffic football, the exact shade of the sky. My grip on Emily's hand loosened from defensive to casual. I told myself I was just a regular man at a regular party, not a headline. The word regular felt like a luxury item I could finally afford again. We found a spot near the patio lights, halfway between the grill and the pool, the Switzerland of any backyard. I could feel my shoulders dropping from my ears. For the first time in a month, I believed ordinary might actually hold. Then I saw her. Rachel stood at the far side of the pool like a statue someone forgot to move inside. Sunglasses on top of her head, hair nailed into place, posture perfect still as water before a thrown stone. A friend leaned in and whispered. Rachel didn't nod, didn't blink. Emily's fingers tightened around mine, a reflex more than a thought. The air recalibrated, music still playing, conversation still happening, but the frequencies shifted as if the party dipped a few degrees and nobody could name why. I followed Rachel's gaze to our hands, to Emily's smile, to the gap between the past and what I was holding now. My heart did that old drum roll men deny they have. I told myself tension is just a rope. It only snaps if you keep pulling. I took a breath, counted to 5 like a therapist in a podcast once told me to, and reminded myself I did not come here to perform. I came here to exist. Rachel started moving before I knew she'd decided to. The path around the pool became a runway. Conversations thinned in her wake like grass after a tire track. She stopped 2 feet from us, close enough to feel the temperature of her anger. "So, this is your idea of a peaceful divorce," she said. Volume calibrated to slice through the chorus of early 2000s hits. Heads turned. A spatula froze mid-flip at the grill. Emily shifted a half step back. I didn't move. The words didn't shock me. The setting did. The woman who'd chosen clean and calm had brought her storm to a backyard with kids and floaties and a bowl of potato salad sweating in the sun. I felt the urge to explain to fix to be the adult in a scene suddenly underlit with teenage heat. My mouth opened and closed. I decided to say less than I felt, which is how men survive parties that turn into courtrooms. Rachel didn't look at me first. She looked at Emily. "You knew what I was going through." She said each word a neat incision. "And this is what you do." It landed like a verdict read before the trial. Emily's throat moved, but she didn't speak. I stepped forward, palms open, trying to lower the temperature. It wasn't planned. I said the gentlest true thing I could offer. It just happened. Rachel snapped, cutting me off like people just happened to fall on each other's lips, on each other's beds. A couple near the grill examined the sky like it had become fascinating. I could feel the story knitting itself in the air, dates, overlaps, motive, a timeline built on the arithmetic of suspicion. It's hard to argue with a math problem people want to be true. I didn't try. I kept my voice level. "No overlap," I said. "None." It sounded thin against the theater of it all, but truth often does. There are sentences you don't plan to say until your chest says them for you. You left before you said it. I told Rachel. You were gone long before the words. Her eyes flashed, not cruel hurt. Because it hurts, she shot back, voice cracking for the first time all day. Because I didn't think you'd move on so fast, especially not with her. The last 2 words weren't just nouns. They were an old map, a circle around a place she used to feel safe. I thought about how grief scrambles clocks, how a month can feel like an hour to one person and a year to another. Fast is a judgment that never knows the inside of the room it condemns. I wanted to tell her that time had been stretching out inside me for months, maybe years. Instead, I said nothing because the truth doesn't always help when the wound is still open and the audience is still listening. When the air fills with heat, you either fan it or you let it pass. I chose to let it pass. You wanted peace. I said soft but steady, like I was telling it to myself as much as to her. I believed you. Don't hate me for finally finding it. The words surprised me with how calm they sounded coming out. They weren't a victory lap. They were a boundary spoken out loud. Rachel stared at me, breath tight, 100 thoughts marching behind her eyes trying to find a door. For a second, I saw the woman I married, the one who could disagree without needing to wind flicker, and then dim. Emily didn't squeeze my hand, she let it go so I could stand on my own. Somewhere behind us, the grill hissed like a snake, and the song changed to something too cheerful for the moment. The world kept going indifferent to our private weather. Rachel shook her head like she was clearing water from her ears. "I thought you'd fade," she said. "Not shouting now, just tired. Not show up smiling with someone I trusted." Trusted the word sank heavy as a ring in a lake. She glanced at Emily once, then at me, then over my shoulder at everyone pretending not to watch. "Enjoy your peace," she said. And it didn't sound sarcastic. It sounded like resignation with sharp edges. She turned toward the side gate, the one everyone uses when they don't want to cross the living room. The gate clicked, and the tension leaked out of the yard in a slow hiss. Conversations rebooted in lowercase. The party didn't end, but it didn't recover either. We were all actors who'd forgotten our lines. We left early, trading the pool's reflection for the windshields. The car smelled like sunscreen, and something burned at the grill that no one would admit to. Emily stared out the window, then at me. "Did we make a mistake?" she asked, voice small but clear. I wanted certainty I couldn't have, so I reached for honesty. "I did. If loving you is a mistake, it's one I'm willing to own," I said. It sounded like a bumper sticker until I felt what it did to my spine. We drove in a silence that wasn't hostile. It was processing. Back home, I texted David an apology for the scene I hadn't started. He sent back a thumbs up and "you're good," which is friend code for "I don't know what to say, but I'm on your side." I slept hard and badly, the kind of sleep that gathers but doesn't rest. My phone lit up past midnight like a small emergency. "Rachel, you broke me." Then a flurry sarcasm accusation revision. Maybe we should revisit parts of the agreement. Maybe lawyers would have been better. Maybe I'd planned this. Maybe I'd been planning it all along. I typed, deleted, typed, deleted. Every draft either defended or attacked. None of them felt like me. I put the phone face down and stared at the dark, like it owed me an explanation. The temptation to make a case is strong when you're innocent and shaken, but innocence doesn't win arguments people need emotionally to lose. I wanted to tell her I hadn't replaced her. I'd replaced the void she left. I wanted to tell her that peace is not a trophy. It's a truce with yourself. Instead, I let the messages pile into a tower I refused to climb, and finally, somewhere near 2 a.m., I let sleep take me sideways. Morning is supposed to rinse the night. It didn't. I scrolled through more messages, the story tightening its net. Timelines redrawn to put me in two places at once, motives assigned like name tags at a conference. The same friends who'd applauded our maturity would now hear about hidden plots and conveniently timed coffee. That's how narratives work. The neat version sells until a messier one does. I thought about the mediation room, glass pitchers, polite nods, easy signatures, and how clean looks noble until you realize it can also be sterile. Maybe we both preferred the press release because the real story was too human for a neat caption. I put the phone down. A man can drown in text as surely as in water. I brewed coffee and chose not to reply, not because I had nothing to say, but because anything I said would be swallowed by a need I couldn't satisfy for her. Emily showed up with bagels, cream cheese, and a silence that didn't demand filling. She put everything on the counter, kissed my cheek, like we'd been doing this for years, and said, "If this is too much, I can take space." No guilt, no test, just a door she was willing to open either way. I felt my chest loosen in a way that made me want to sit down. "I don't want space from you," I said. "I want space from the noise." We ate standing up, two people who'd survived a small hurricane in a public park. I told her about the texts, the parts that stung, the parts that made me laugh against my will. She listened the way good listeners do, present not performing presence. When we were done, she washed the knife and left it to dry. Small, ordinary acts can be louder than speeches. I realized this kitchen finally felt like mine. I grew up learning to hold. Hold your breath under the wave. Hold your face in the argument. Hold your tongue when you want to swing. The armor works until it rusts from the inside. I heard that keep it together voice say, "Don't let the show." Then another voice, the one I usually ignore, asked, "What if showing is the only way through?" I told Emily I was shaken, not ruined, not fragile, just rattled in the bones. Saying it didn't make me smaller. It made the room bigger. The shame I'd been hauling around for feeling anything at all set itself down for a minute. Men think admitting impact is an admission of weakness. It isn't. It's an admission of contact. Life hit you. You're still here. That afternoon, I canceled one plan, kept another, and let myself be a person instead of a performance. It felt like progress in a language I was just starting to speak. I drafted a message to Rachel and read it out loud until it sounded like a person, not a press release. I won't engage with insults, I wrote. If there are logistical matters we need to address, I'll respond. Otherwise, I'm stepping back. No threats. No legalese. No sermon. A fence, not a wall. Boundaries get a bad name because they feel like punishment to the person who wants access without accountability. To me, they felt like a way to keep the temperature from boiling every time my phone buzzed. I hit send and felt the thud of silence that follows any line drawn. Maybe she'd rage. Maybe she'd comply. Either way, I'd set the terms under which I could be decent. That's all a boundary, is the conditions required for your best self to stay in the room. By noon, the WhisperNet had done its job. Mutual friends texted in two distinct dialects, the curious and the concerned. Hey man, you good? And so. Quick question. I gave the same answer both times. I'm okay. No overlap. We're taking it slow. I didn't provide screenshots, timelines, affidavits. Gossip is an engine that runs on oxygen. I wasn't going to be the gas station. A couple of people pushed for more. I declined without being coy. The ones who mattered didn't press. They could read the truth in my face the last month, the tired eyes that got less tired, the laughter returning like a muscle you forgot you had. I reminded myself that not every narrative needs my edits. Some stories burn themselves out when you stop feeding them. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and let the day be a day. Again. That night, I walked the house like a museum of quiet exhibits. The couch we bought on sale, its middle cushion permanently softened by years of two bodies sinking toward each other without thinking. The picture frames we never filled, standing like little doorways to rooms we never entered. The plant by the window that had started to brown months before we noticed. None of it was dramatic. All of it was evidence. Our marriage hadn't died with a scandal. It had thinned out until it couldn't carry its own weight. People want villains because villains make sense of pain. Sometimes the villain is drift a slow permission we grant each other to stop showing up. That's a betrayal too, the kind you can't screenshot, the kind you only feel when you realize you've been talking to an echo for a year. I stood there, turned off the last lamp, and finally admitted it. The end had started long before the ending. People kept using the word fast as if healing had speed limits and radar guns. I asked myself the harder question, was I sprinting or had I simply stepped out of a room that had been empty for a long time? There's a difference between velocity and timing. Velocity is miles per hour. Timing is doors that have been open for months, and you finally notice the breeze. With Emily, nothing felt rushed. It felt available. I replayed the last year with Rachel and saw all the small goodbyes we didn't name missed dinners, affectionate jokes that landed like pebbles weekends too busy to plan. Moving on wasn't jumping. It was landing after a fall that started long before the papers. If the outside world wanted to call that fast fine, I was done defending the pace of my own heartbeat. The only clock that mattered was the one I'd ignored ticking quietly in my chest, saying it's time. I kept circling the contradiction. Rachel wanted peace, but only if she could define it. Who speaks, when we speak, what counts as mature. The moment I stopped being the quiet ex, peace turned into a verdict. That's the trick with certain kinds of calm. It's conditional. It feels enlightened until life refuses to follow the script. Then the mask cracks, and you see the machinery underneath control with good PR. I'm not innocent in this. I liked the press release too. We did it like adults is easier to say. Then we drifted until we couldn't find each other. But the backyard confrontation showed me what our calm had been costing my voice, my needs, my messy human right to move forward without asking permission. Real peace doesn't need you to shrink to fit inside it. It can survive you having a life. If it can't, it isn't peace. It's staging. More texts came, hints about revisiting the agreement lines, about making this right. Little flares tossed over the fence to see if anything would ignite. My thumbs wanted to prosecute the whole case, dates, receipts, the precise hours that would clear my name. Emily picked up my phone, set it face down, and said, "Breathe first." I inhaled like it was a task I could complete. Rage is a quick fuel. It makes you feel powerful and precise right up until it burns your house down. I poured water instead, a reply drafted but not sent a call. I didn't make a statement I saved for when I wasn't shaking. Choosing water felt weak in the moment. Later, it felt like the strongest thing I'd done all week. You don't have to win every skirmish to win your life. Sometimes you save the foundation by letting a match go out on its own. Gossip doesn't just test your reputation, it tests your relationship. Emily walked straight through the whispers without asking me to rehearse alibis. She didn't make me pick a team. She asked me to pick myself. "I'm here if this helps you be you," she said. "If it doesn't, I'll step back." That's a terrifying kind of generosity because it gives you no excuses. I couldn't hide behind her certainty. I had to grow my own. She showed up for the boring parts, breakfast errands, the mid-afternoon slump, where you're not sad or happy, just human. Love looked less like rescue and more like endurance. Not dramatic gestures, but consistent presence. I realized I wasn't bracing around her. My shoulders came down, my sentences got shorter, my laugh got real. Staying isn't glamorous. It's brave. And it made the noise outside sound like what it was, weather, not prophecy. I kept telling myself I was angry, and I was. But anger was just the doorman. The guest inside was grief. Not only for Rachel the person, but for the version of me that only existed inside that marriage. The fixer, the absorber, the man who thought holding still was the same as holding on. Grief is sneaky when you won't call it by name. It hides in busyness and jokes, in the long scroll before bed. I sat at the kitchen table and said it out loud. I'm grieving. The room didn't change, but the pressure did. Once you name grief, it stops ransacking the place and sits down. It still hurts. It just stops pretending to be everything else. That gave me a way to measure progress that wasn't public or performative. Not am I over it, but did I give the ache a chair today instead of a steering wheel? Weekdays ran on autopilot, emails, meetings, small talk in the elevator about nothing. I could be competent from 9 to 5. Then Saturday would arrive like a wide, empty hallway. That's when the echo got loud. Emily learned my weekends were the danger zone and started smuggling in ordinary farmers markets with tomatoes that tasted like Sun, a hardware store where a stranger taught me about drywall anchors, a matinee we forgot the plot of by dinner. None of it was cinematic, and that was the point. Routine is rehab for a life that's been living on adrenaline. I didn't need a grand plan. I needed groceries, a list, and someone to laugh with when the self-checkout accused us of theft. The more I stacked these small, normal things, the less the house sounded like it was scolding me. If peace is built, this is the lumber. It started raining halfway back from tacos, the kind of summer storm that doesn't ask. We ran, failed to be cool about it, and ended up under a flickering awning that did more for atmosphere than dryness. Emily pulled her hoodie tight and laughed a full, unguarded laugh that made people turn their heads in the best way. I realized my body had been waiting for that sound like a password. I forgot I could feel this, I said, surprised at myself. Me too, she said, brushing water from my cheek with a thumb like it belonged there. No violins, no epiphany lighting, just two damp adults grinning at nothing and everything. Grief didn't vanish. It made room. That's all joy needs, a little room to set its bag down and stay a while. We walked the rest of the way slow, not because of the rain, but because we finally could. I ran into Rachel at the grocery store, the Switzerland of X's. She looked at my cart like it was a diary. Eggs, coffee, flowers. For her, she asked, voice, steady, eyes, not. For me, I said. And sometimes for her, it wasn't a performance. It was the truth. For the first time since the party, the word her didn't stab. It just pointed. We stood there between cereal and milk like two people waiting out a traffic light. She glanced at the flowers again. I realized I'd bought them out of habit for the house, not a person. I used to buy things to fill a silence. Now I was buying things because the silence had become livable. That distinction is invisible on a receipt, but obvious in your chest. We said take care at the same time and almost smiled. The moment passed without leaving debris. A week later, I saw Rachel again, this time in the parking lot. I didn't think it would be this hard, she said. No preamble, eyes on the asphalt. Me neither, I answered. The apology hovered between us like a radio station just out of range, static, almost music. I didn't push for it. Some words aren't ripe yet. For once, I didn't try to manage her experience or rescue mine. We stood there long enough for a breeze to move the conversation along. She tucked hair behind her ear, a gesture I used to read as a tell. Now it was just hair and wind. See you, she said. See you, I said. We both walked away lighter, not because anything was fixed, but because nothing got reopened. Closure isn't always a door slamming. Sometimes it's two people agreeing not to keep standing in the doorway. That night, I sent a simple text, "I wish you well. Let's keep communication to logistics. No sermon, no footnotes, no hidden blade." She replied, "Okay." Not okay, but just okay. The weather changed, storm to drizzle, drizzle to wet pavement reflecting streetlights. Boundaries get easier once you experience the relief they create. They aren't punishments. They're contracts with yourself about what you can sustain without becoming someone you don't like. I pinned the thread so I wouldn't overthink it later. Then I put my phone down and sat in the quiet on purpose. I felt no triumph, only alignment, like a picture finally hung straight on the wall. The house didn't cheer, neither did I. But I slept without checking the screen for aftershocks, and in the morning, the coffee tasted like coffee, not a negotiation. We didn't implode. We eroded. Late arrivals that became normal. Apologies delivered like receipts without eye contact. Jokes that nicked skin and got filed under, "We're just kidding." A weekend skipped here, a plan canceled there, intimacy rescheduled until it forgot our address. No single act to point at, no headline sin. Just inches added up until the bridge couldn't carry the weight. People like clean villains because they simplify pain. But inch by inch is a crime scene without fingerprints. You wake up on opposite shores and call the river betrayal. Maybe it is. Maybe it's what betrayal looks like when no one wants to get their hands dirty. Saying this doesn't absolve me. It convicts me. I let inches slide because confronting them felt impolite. It cost me a marriage. I won't pay that way again. Men don't talk about the animal fear of being replaced. We mask it with jokes or arrogance, anything but the naked truth we want to be chosen still. I kept waiting for that fear to bite and realized it already had months before Emily. I'd been replaced by neglect, by the slow fade that leaves you standing in your own house like a guest. That's the part you can't punch. You can argue with a man. You can't argue with a shrug. Recognizing that shifted something. Emily wasn't the replacement. She was the proof I wasn't disposable after all. The panic quieted, not gone, just manageable, like a smoke alarm finally silenced, because someone found the right chair to stand on and pressed the button. I booked a therapist because I was tired of being brave alone. In that room, I learned vocabulary. I used to roll my eyes at attachment rupture repair. Turned out the words weren't soft. They were tools. Avoiding conflict wasn't peace, it was debt. And debt collects interest. We mapped my patterns like a mechanic under a car, where things leak, where they grind, what needs grease, what needs replacing. I practiced sentences out loud that felt like bad translations. At first, I don't want. That hurt. The more I said them, the less they sounded like alarms, and the more they sounded like directions. I left sessions lighter, not because anything was magically fixed, but because I wasn't the only one carrying the toolbox anymore. David called to check in. He's not a speech guy. He's a practical man with a grill and a good heart. "You okay?" he asked. "Getting there," I said. He paused. "Rachel's hurting too." The old me would have taken that as an accusation. The current me heard it as a weather report. "I know," I said. "Pain isn't a scoreboard. It's a storm that hits different roofs at different times." We talked about nothing for a while. Sports a new burger rub he was testing, whether early 2000s playlists should be retired. Hanging up, I felt steadier. It helps to have a friend who can see the whole sky, not just the cloud over your house. I didn't need permission to move on, but it didn't hurt to be reminded I wasn't the only one living under changeable weather. We ate pasta on the living room floor because the table still felt like a negotiation. Paper bowls, cheap red wine, a playlist that couldn't decide between soul and silence. Emily twirled noodles and asked, "What does peace look like for you? Really?" I'd been dodging that question, dressing it up in abstractions. The answer came out plain. Not pretending. Not performing maturity I don't feel. Not swallowing words so other people stay comfortable. Not calling surrender dignity. Emily nodded like I'd just said something you can build on. Then let's not pretend she said handing me a napkin like a treaty. We ate, talked about nothing, and let the room be messy without making it mean we were. That night, the definition felt less like a motto and more like a compass. Peace isn't quiet at any cost. It's honesty without cruelty. If I could keep that line clear, maybe the rest would stop blurring. We clinked plastic cups and declared the floor good enough to be home. It arrived late, a long braid of nostalgia and blame threaded with the greatest hits of our marriage vacations, inside jokes, the fight about curtains, then the minor key refrain of accusation. I read it twice, once with my pulse up, once with my shoulders down. The first read begged for a rebuttal. The second recognized a loop I'd been running for months, clarify, deepen, soothe, repeat. I put the phone on the counter and let the message be a message instead of a summons. Choosing not to reply didn't feel like winning. It felt like ending a game that only produces losers. I stood at the sink and watched water bead on a plate we hadn't dried. Silence can be passive-aggressive, but this wasn't that. This was a clean stop. The urge to fix is strong in me. It's how I've disguised my fear for years. I let the urge pass like a wave that can't hold you if you don't brace against it. The kitchen exhaled. So did I. We love neat villains. They let us file pain under a single name. But the longer I sit with this, the more I see betrayal in smaller, pettier shapes, permission to drift, indifference dressed as tolerance, the slow starving of attention until one person drowns and the other calls it weather. I betrayed Rachel that way too, by letting inches add up because confronting them felt impolite. It's easier to point at a scandal than at neglect you co-authored. No one applauds when you admit that, but owning it lets me carry less. I don't need to turn Rachel into a monster or Emily into a cure. The story doesn't get cleaner when I do. It just gets less true. Betrayal, I've learned, can happen at room temperature. It can happen over years of not asking hard questions because you're afraid of the answers. The fix isn't a grand gesture. It's paying attention before the silence starts to sound like peace. We bumped into each other at a cafe that had upgraded its chairs but not its coffee. Spring was doing that thing where it pretends to be summer for an hour, then switches back. We stood in line, made soft talk about work, the weather, the way the city finally smells like trees again. No spark, no ice. Just two people who used to share bills and dreams and now share sidewalks. I noticed how normal her voice sounded and how normal mine did too. The barista misheard both our names. We laughed at nothing and let it be enough. I didn't rehearse apologies. She didn't audition anger. We sipped, we nodded, we stepped out of each other's way when the line needed space. That's all it was, a traffic merge with eye contact. The moment didn't promise closure, but it also didn't reopen anything. Sometimes healing looks like ordering medium roast and meaning it. Outside, under a weak patch of sun, Rachel asked it clean surgical, "Were you already in love with her?" There was no accusation in the tone, just the need to know the shape of the wound. "No," I said, and felt the truth land. I fell after. I fell fast because I'd been falling alone for a long time. The sentence sounded rehearsed, but it wasn't. It had been building in me like a pressure change, waiting for a window to open. She watched my face, not my words, and something in her posture softened by a degree. We both understand clocks differently now. A month to one person can be a year to another when the leaving begins before the luggage moves. "Okay," she said, and it wasn't approval so much as acceptance of math she didn't like but couldn't refute. The sun slid behind a cloud. We both put our hands in our pockets and let the moment finish itself. "I thought I'd heal first," she said, almost to herself. "Me too," I admitted, which surprised us both. There's a secret competition in every breakup, a race no one signs up for but everyone runs. Who smiles first in pictures, who sleeps through the night, who says we're good and means it. We stood there in a draw, not because we crossed the same line at the same time, but because we finally realized there is no line. Healing isn't a podium, it's a weather pattern. It hits when it hits leaves, when it leaves, and returns to check if you learned anything. We traded a small, tired smile, the kind you reserve for people who know too much about you to be impressed. Then we did the kindest thing exes can do. We didn't rewrite the past, and we didn't predict the future. We just let each other go, again gently in daylight, with coffee breath, and no ceremony. I kept my circle small and told them the uninteresting version. No overlap, no grand plan. Just two adults finding something gentle after a hard end. A few believe me immediately. You can hear truth when it isn't trying to sell itself. Others preferred the gossip's remix. It's catchier, easier to dance to at parties. I didn't argue. I've learned you can't litigate rumor with facts. You can only starve it of attention. I answered what I owed and left the rest unanswered. Maybe that leaves the scoreboard looking wrong for a while. I can live with that. There's a quiet dignity in not correcting every revision of your life. Time edits better than I do. Meanwhile, I kept my promises to myself: therapy on Tuesdays, basketball on Thursdays, a standing date with Emily that didn't pretend to be anything but joy. Let the narrative drift. My calendar tells the real story. Emily admitted she was afraid of being the villain in someone else's story forever. Why is so rare? She could live with being disliked. She couldn't live with us lying to make it easier. I want clean, not curated, she said, and I heard the difference. Curated is angles and lighting. Clean is saying the thing you'd rather fold into a prettier sentence. We sat on the porch steps, knees touching, and decided the only protection we'd keep was the truth. How we started when we started, why it felt quiet instead of loud. She didn't ask for guarantees. She asked for consistency. I took her hand and realized my chest wasn't braced anymore. The world might still throw side-eye. That's weather. What we had felt like shelter. You can't control the storm. You can decide which house you stand in when it hits. Ours creaked sometimes, but it held. It happened without fanfare, 8 hours unbroken. I woke before my alarm and didn't sprint for the phone. The house sounded like a house again, not a museum of what used to be. I made coffee, and it tasted like a beginning instead of a bandage. The mug warmed my hands without asking for anything in return. Small shifts announced themselves. The throw blanket folded itself. The couch dip felt like comfort, not collapse. The hallway didn't echo. I didn't pray gratitude into the air. I just stood there and let the ordinary register. Peace, I realized, isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of calm. The difference is felt, not announced. I texted Emily a picture of the sunlight on the kitchen floor. She sent back a heart and be right over. No exclamation marks. No parade. The day didn't need decoration. It already fit. I laced up for pickup basketball with guys from work and remembered how good it feels to clank a three and laugh anyway. I called my brother just to talk about nothing. I texted my mom a photo of dinner that wouldn't impress Instagram, but impressed me. I RSVP'd yes to a coworker's housewarming and brought beer like a normal guest. The errands returned oil change, laundry, the dumb satisfaction of a clean trunk. I wasn't a problem to be managed. I was a person with a weekend. Therapy didn't make me a new man. It made me the same man with different tools. Boundaries kept buzzing in my pocket like a silent alarm that never needed to go off. When Emily curled up on the opposite end of the couch under the same blanket, I didn't narrate the moment in my head. I let it be. That more than anything felt like getting my name back. Love It turns out looks less like fireworks and more like a grocery list. Emily and I split a cart the way some people split a bill, fair easy without keeping score. We stick notes on the fridge. Out of oat milk, call your brother. You've got this pizza after therapy. We share a blanket from opposite ends of the couch, feet colliding like kids who never learned boundaries and decided they didn't need to. The drama is gone, replaced by trust that doesn't announce itself. She hands me a mug before I ask. I fix the shelf she keeps threatening to overpack. We argue about dumb things like the right pasta shape for red sauce and make up before the water boils. Our pictures are boring on purpose. Good lighting, real smiles. No captions that try to sell a story. I used to think love needed spectacle to be real. Now I think the spectacle is a distraction. Love is showing up on schedule with the thing you promised you'd bring, even if it's just the napkins. I walked past the restaurant where we used to celebrate anniversaries. The sign hadn't changed. The window still reflected the street like a polite mirror. I waited for the hit nostalgia's small knife, but nothing sharp arrived. I felt a warmth instead, the kind that comes from a scar you've stopped poking. Scars don't mean the wound was trivial. They mean the wound did its job. It taught your body how to close. I looked in, saw couples doing what couples do, checking menus, laughing at something funnier to them than to the table next to them, and I didn't cast us into their silhouettes. I just kept walking. Gratitude surprised me, then a quiet, unshowy kind. Thank you for what was good. Thank you for what ended. Thank you for the version of me that survived both. I used to confuse numbness with healing. This wasn't numb, it was a seam holding. I texted Emily passing the old place. All good, she replied with a heart and come home. I already was. People still ask how we started. They want the catchy version sparks over scandal, a twist that explains everything. I give them the uninteresting truth we began after the end. In the quiet. No overlap, no scheme. Just two people who found a soft place to land when the noise finally stopped. It's not a viral story, and that's fine. I don't need strangers to applaud the plot. I need my days to make sense when I'm the only audience. Sometimes I see the flash in their eyes that says, "So you're the bad guy or the rebound." I let it pass. You can't edit everyone's conclusions. The people who matter have seen the calendar, not the rumor. They saw the weeks I spent hollow and the weeks that followed where my laugh came back one room at a time. If our story is simple, it's because simple survived the test. Messy beginnings crave headlines. Honest ones just ask for time. Rachel called on a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of hour that doesn't support drama. "I'm okay," she said. "I met someone." The words landed like rain on a roof already built to handle weather. "Good," I said, and meant it. We didn't trade apologies or inventory the past. We didn't declare ourselves evolved. We acknowledged what the forecast had been hinting at for weeks. The fronts had moved on. I asked if she was taking care of herself. She said yes, then asked the same of me. We kept it short not because we were cold, but because warmth doesn't always require a long call. When we hung up, I didn't feel triumph or loss. I felt alignment, the click of something finally sitting where it belongs. I told Emily later. She hugged me and didn't ask for details. Some updates don't need commentary. They just need space to settle. The sky outside went from bright to overcast and back again. Weather doing what weather does. Forgiveness didn't arrive as a ceremony. It showed up in practical ways. I stopped keeping a mental ledger of who hurt who when. I stopped replaying the party scene like a sports highlight and demanding a different outcome. I pictured the receipts I'd saved as proof screenshots, internal transcripts, arguments only I could hear, and I burned them in my head, not out of spite, but relief. Forgiveness, I learned, is parole for the self. You release the version of you that's still standing in the kitchen, demanding the past admit guilt. You let him go outside. You let him breathe air that isn't cross-examined. It didn't pull Rachel and me back together. That's not the job. It pulled me back together. I moved lighter, not because the story changed, but because I stopped dragging it like a suitcase with a broken wheel. Emily noticed first. "You're quieter," she said, "the good kind." I smiled. I finally put the luggage down. If I have to define peace again, I'll define it like this: walking into a backyard with your head up because you didn't lie to stay liked. It's not silence. Silence can be a muzzle. Peace is honesty without the need to humiliate or be humiliated. It's standing where life put you and not shrinking to fit someone else's storyboard. It's knowing which texts not to answer and which doors to hold open. It's therapy appointments on the calendar, like oil changes, maintenance you do because breakdowns are expensive. It's telling the truth when the truth is small and boring so it doesn't grow teeth. Most of all, peace is the absence of pretending. I pretended for years, called it dignity, called it maturity, called it weather. Now when I feel myself rehearsing, I stop. I choose the shorter sentence. I let the room be the room. If that passes for peace, I'll take it. It's the only version I trust. Men were taught to shoulder it all until something snaps and then apologize for the noise. I tried that. It doesn't work. Say the thing before it turns into a problem with a lawyer's name. Ask for what you need without waiting for a crisis to justify it. Draw lines that keep you decent, not dominant. If you're scared of being replaced, admit it. If you're tired of being the strong one, sit down. Strength isn't a silent movie. It's a conversation sometimes with a therapist, sometimes with the friend who actually listens, sometimes with the woman on the other end of the couch who hands you a mug before you realize you're cold. Set boundaries. Keep your word. And when you mess up, repair out loud. The men I admire aren't unbreakable. They're fixable and they do the fixing. That's the kind of man I'm trying to be. Less armor, more backbone. If that looks softer from the outside, fine. It's harder on the inside where it counts. Rachel, if you ever hear this, I hope your piece is real. Now unstaged, unforced, not curated for anyone else's approval. Thank you for ending what we couldn't repair. That sentence used to taste like failure. Now it tastes like truth. We both learned the cost of inches, how drift looks harmless until it isn't. You taught me that clean isn't the same as kind, and I taught myself that calm isn't the same as quiet. I don't need a final word or a better argument. I just need the weather to be honest when it changes. I wish you soft mornings, fewer receipts, and a house that sounds like a house. As for me, I've stopped waiting for the version of us that never arrives. I'm busy tending to the version of me that did. If we pass on a sidewalk and wave, let it mean exactly what it looks like. Two people who once shared a life and now share a city, both still moving forward. Here's what stayed with me after the smoke cleared. Betrayal isn't always a headline. It can be the quiet permission to drift until somebody drowns. And peace. Peace isn't bestowed like a trophy. Peace is built boundary by boundary, truth by truth, choice by choice. Every single day. I didn't find peace because Emily rescued me. I found it because I stopped pretending. I stood still, told the truth, and let a good thing be exactly what it was. Rachel's okay in her way now, and so am I in mine. Different clocks, same weather system, finally moving on. If any part of this felt like your life, or like the life of someone you love, don't carry it alone. Share this with the friend who's fine but sinking in silence. Send it to the guy who thinks strength means never saying what hurts. Maybe this is the nudge he needs to come up for air. And if you want more stories told straight, no villains, invented, no feelings, prettied up, hit subscribe. This is Cheating Tales, true unflinching for men who want to heal without losing their self-respect. New episodes are coming. Stick around. We'll keep telling the hard truths until the quiet sounds like peace.